Thanks for tuning in again today. We're going into listening to the voice of God, or recognizing the voice of God. And one of the things we need to understand is, how do we recognize the enemy's voice? How do we know when it's not God speaking to us? At times the enemy will seek to counterfeit the Lord's voice to mislead us. And the key to distinguishing God's voice from the enemy's is becoming more acquainted with God's voice. Means more time with him. So there's this blind man, and his job was handling money for the Treasury Department in Washington, D.C. He became so sensitive to the feel of money that if anyone handed him a counterfeit bill, he knew immediately, hey, this is a fake. His discernment came from knowing true money so well and not knowing the false. He probably never would have been able to recognize real money if he had spent his time trying to get to know the feel of the many different counterfeit bills that exist. So the best way to tell the enemy's voice from the Lord's is to know the Lord's voice so well that we are easily able to distinguish it from any other voices. So what's the point I'm making here? Get to know the Lord's voice. Don't try and work out when it's not his voice. Get to know his voice so well that as soon as it's not his voice, you will immediately recognize, hey, that's not the voice of God. Let's look at some of the ways that God actually does speak. Number one, very obvious, through other Christians. Often the Lord's voice will come through a person. Sometimes that may require us to humble ourselves because it may come from one of our kids. You know, someone that we don't even highly regard, but God's voice can come through them. So it takes humility of heart and to hearing the voice of God, but it's important if we're going to know his will more and more. Psalm 25 verse 9, he guides the humble in what is right and teaches them his way. Humility is a key. Second way is you feel peace. Listen to this one carefully. Colossians 3:15, let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. A number of times I've experienced great peace that made no sense. Once before a phone call that I was really concerned about, I felt great peace and I thought, wow, this call is going to be okay. And it was. When you're facing a decision, after making a decision, if it's a right decision, many times you'll feel a peace in your heart. In making major decisions, I always look for and wait for peace. I always encourage people, don't ever make decisions without God's peace in your heart. But let me give you a warning. Sometimes when we make a decision we want to make and we get what we want, we feel peace. That's only because we've got what we want, not necessarily because it was actually what God wanted for us. So just got to be careful of a counterfeit peace that's happening. I recall a time in my life when I probably faced one of the biggest decisions I've ever made. One that would impact my life, my calling, my whole future in God. It was a huge decision and would require a lot of courage on my part. I battled with it. It's not something that would only take a few months to do, a few weeks to do, but it was going to take months. Eventually, this is what I did. I said, God, the only way I can make a decision this big and be confident it is you is I'm going to need a supernatural peace that's unmistakable to fill my heart. God in his goodness amazingly gave me this wonderful peace, not for a few days or weeks, but for months. And it gave me the strength to follow through on the decision that I believed was what God wanted me to make, and it has proved to be the right decision. But what was the key in that situation? The peace of God ruled in my heart. It is a powerful form of guidance or a powerful way of hearing God's voice.